The Living Zen-podcast is a gift from the members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre to you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to let your friends know about Living Zen. If you'd like to support our community, here are a few ways that you can do it. Download the Living Zen podcast app for iPod, iPhone, or Android. You can also purchase additional Zen Talks by Venerable Eshu on iTunes or Amazon.com. One of the most meaningful ways to show your support is by joining our Sangha as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen podcast and our online e-Zendo will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at www.zenwest.ca and click on the membership tab. Thank you for your support.
The knocking hollow sound, I wasn't looking, so I'm not sure what it was, but it's new since I was here a long time ago, but the Sidley...
Yeah, the Han, it's called, yeah.
Or what's the meaning?
Han's, basically, it's... One moment. In the practice center, in a monastic setting, basically, all of the transitions of the day are marked by instruments. So that I always feel like whenever we do a meditation period like this, like a group like this, that you get kind of like it's like playing one or two bars from a song. Like we're just going to play the chorus, right? And so when you're in an intensive or whenever you do sort of a longer, like a full schedule where you're going from morning to night, it's a very different experience than sort of this like clipped out piece of practice that we do on a Tuesday night or on a Sunday morning. Because everything, the morning you're woken up by a bell, and there's clappers that call people to Zendo, and there's bells that indicate, there's different patterns and everything. So that the whole fabric of the practice becomes this song. I always refer to it as like the song of practice. So the Kaihan or the Han, it's called. Han just means the board, right? And it sounded in the morning, usually it sounded at the time of day when there's enough light. Traditionally, it's enough light that standing outside you can see clearly the lines of on your hand. And it sounded, and when the Kaihan is sounded in the morning, all of the artificial lights are extinguished, right? So like any lamps or anything like that, because before then it's sort of like dim lighting to be able to see. And then in the evening, the Han is sounded at the beginning of the evening practice session, and it's sounded at the close of the evening practice session. And so that's why it's sounded here, is that it's sort of like, because the context is sort of when you're in a training center, everyone that's there at training at the center isn't necessarily doing Zendo practice. Like the Tenzo, the cook, is down in the kitchen. And so he hears the Kaihan and he's like, oh God, like it's evening practice time. So he's got to straighten up and get up there. Or at the end of the night, everybody who's doing other jobs around the Zendo can follow the schedule. So that's what it's for. And it's just, I always find the Kaihan is a wonderful, it's just whenever I'm doing formal practice and it's such a quiet practice, sound is a very powerful practice tool that that sound can just really pull you right into it, so that you're sort of absorbed in the experience of hearing. And it's it's a great practice, whether it's raining or whether there are bells or clappers or drums or gongs, or we have all kinds of fun instrumentation. Waves crashing, yeah. Frogs chirping, yeah. No, it's
sometimes people forgetting where they are, just right in the middle of it. Tonight, that was me tonight. I'm finishing it. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's a very it's really easy to think about it as like whacking a board with a hammer. But it's a song, right? Like there's certain strokes that you play, and there's like a pattern to it. And you really have to be focused on what you're doing, because it's really easy to go, am I on 5 or 3 or 7? And it's just like, whew. So you have to kind of, simple but not easy. That's like the name of the game in Zen is, how can you keep this simple but make it as hard as possible? So, yeah. You had a question? Was it the same question? Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean that means that you played it well. So yeah.
Laura? I would like to know why, when putting out a candle, you use snuffer rather than blow it out.
There's so many things in Zen that are just like, it's like, we're so used to sort of religion being like, everything has a very spiritual component to it. But in Zen, you find that so much is really practical. For example, the Kaihan, one of the main reasons it was sounded and like everything's extinguished at once isn't because it's because we're cheap and we beg for everything. And in the old days, lamp oil was really expensive. So, as soon as there's enough light that you can see the lines on your hand, put the lights out. That stuff's expensive. So it's the same with extinguishing candles by squeezing them, by sort of like snuffing them. It's fire safety. Is basically like in the old days whenever you're blowing on a candle, there's sparks, and if you watch, you blow out a candle and walk away, it's still smoking. And we have very consistently made candles nowadays, but even so, in a temple, usually all wooden building, candles are really dangerous. We had one pretty serious fire at the Victoria Zen Centre. Not where we are now, in the previous, before Keegan was born. So generally I'm pretty fire paranoid.
So when sitting at home, is
Mm-hmm.
it part of the practice to do the same?
Is it part of it? I mean, it's good fire safety practice.
So other than fire safety,
No, there's no uber significance. I mean, I find that there is a couple good reasons. One is that when you snuff candles, how they burn and how efficiently they burn changes. Because when you blow it out, the wick continues to smolder, and you usually have a shorter wick, which usually ends up with you have a bunch of wax in the bottom of your candle holder and no more wick left, and so you end up throwing out a lot. And you'll find at the Victoria Zen Centre, when the candle gets to the bottom, it's like nothing but a metal thing, right? And I know now it's like, wax is so cheap and blah, 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 but we're cheap. So, I just, as I said, I just finished this major fundraising thing. So it's very important for me to feel like people are donating money to keep this ship afloat, so we have to kind of use it efficiently. So, but, whatever. If you feel like, thrifty with the wax, burn away. Yeah.
Maybe that's something like snuffing out life or something, but it's not.
You can do that. Life and death. Yeah.
Leftover
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, not enlightening question, just a practical question.
Mm-hmm.
What type of incense do you use? Because this stuff doesn't make me sneeze cough.
Oh, it's very, very interesting that you mentioned that. This is there are some different brands that you can get. This box was brought by one of our members' wives from Japan, and it's a low smoke incense.
Fantastic.
So I can get you the information if you want.
No, I was just so happy you had it.
Well, yeah, I guess if it bothers you, you're not going to I'm going to run out and buy a box. Yeah, no, okay, cool. Yeah, no, there's and more and more. I mean, we've actually we've made some changes to the form to actually reduce the amount of incense that we're burning, because it is. I really like it, and I sort of grew up and was trained with a lot of incense, but it's smoke. So
I love it, but my throat swells.
Yeah.
So I had to take Benadryl the very first time I came.
Right. Yeah, and because it's so much of it is specific woods, like you can be totally fine with one, and then they light another one, and you're like, so, yeah.
I was wondering, when when you're talking about whatever sound, drumming,
Mhm.
wood sounds, I do sound healing and touch, and I find personally that sound, the beginning and end, the striking of whatever object it may be, wood or otherwise, that for me there's that healing, maybe of silence or of going into our core, but that part for me is connected with sound. I don't know whether that's, has any significance in the sound that it produces, but for me there is.
Yeah, well, I think Gente once really, he's another senior teacher, gave a really great talk about sound and really kind of changed my perspective on it, because we think about all the senses being really separate. But when you think about the sense of sound, it is actually an evolution of the sense of touch. And so I think that, because it's like, as organisms, what we experience sound as is a physical contact of waves hitting us, right? And the ears interpret that and we call it sound, but it's actually a form of touch. So I think that it's totally reasonable that, we have this really large gong at the Zen Centre that sounded just before the talks on a formal Sunday. It's like a 34-inch symphonic gong, right? So it's like everyone's sitting in the zendo and it's just like this, and everyone, and there's days where we, it's been a shortened schedule, and it's quite, there is an element of theater in Zen. My personal background is in theater, and that's it's very appealing to me. But some days, it's like, we don't have time for all the high theater, so let's sort of cut it out. And often sort of, we cut the gong, and then I do the talk and come to interviews, and people are like, how come we didn't play the gong today? Where was the gong? So I think that there's a lot, there is a tremendous power in sound, because it is an experiential demonstration of the connectedness of the world. It's not just, if you go and hear a beautiful piece of music, or it doesn't even have to be a piece of music. I tell you, on halfway through a retreat, and some kind of finch or something starts singing, and it's just, you can be just totally overwhelmed by it, like brought to tears. And it's just like, it's not just this thing out there that's making it, it's we're in a relationship, and it's totally felt rather than understood. So yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it, for sure. And when the gong sounds before mealtime, there's a powerful... yeah. So.
And we have some healing sutras as well.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if, because I know you asked about the candle snuffing thing, I'm not sure if the short hair has a practical or a spiritual significance, like for either shaving your head if you're a monk, or just keeping your hair short. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, everything. All of that stuff was really super practical at the beginning, because in the beginning, the Buddha's order. We have to kind of have a bit of a cultural kind of lesson, is that in India at the time of Buddha, there was and there still is, a deeply entrenched caste system. And so only certain types of people would really go and do spiritual practice. Other people had sort of like, your job was laid out for you. And the Buddha created an order of spiritual practice, and he actually accepted people from every caste, which was quite countercultural, I guess you would call it. And there's a lot of different ways that you can tell a person's social caste, and one of them is by the hair that they wear, one of them is by the clothes that they wear. And so when we, to this day, when we do practice at the Victoria Zen Centre, I say, okay, so we're having this thing at the Suk Zendo, you have to have a gi to come. There's a reason for that. We express the self through how we wear our hair and how we wear our clothes. And so originally this idea of shaving the head and wearing the patched robe was a great social equalizer. Once somebody did that, you couldn't really tell where they came from, how they were raised, those kinds of things. Practically, there's a bunch of practically there's a bunch of great reasons. When you live with a bunch of people in an earthy environment in India, having no hair is just a matter of hygiene. It's one great thing. The other is that the practice of shaving the head it's a great metaphor for what practice is like. Our fixations and attachments are constantly growing back. We don't get rest from them. I've had a lot of people who have sort of said, you should try some like electrolysis or something like that. You wouldn't have to shave so much. But there's actually a verse of shaving the head, and the practice of shaving the head is this constant recommitment to engaging in practice. And so it's actually, for me, I don't shave my face anymore, but it's a wonderful, I have a great time when I shave.
That happened last week.
What?
Your beard.
This week? This beard?
You shave every week.
Yeah, I shave every week. It's just fast growing, No, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah. And the last thing is and this sort of is related to everything. In the ceremony of ordination, you shave the candidate's head, and the verse is about cutting off attachment to appearances. It's really it's a letting go of, what I was talking about tonight, this sort of idea that we are, I am this, and letting go of the attachment to the physical form. So it's much more powerful. In olden days, I think it was much more powerful for men than it is today. Like today, it's not a big deal for a man to shave his head. All the cool athletes are doing it, it's not a big deal. But in the olden days, certainly in the times of the Buddha, for a man to shave his head and beard was a huge deal. And really, when Soshin was ordained, I find with women it's a much more powerful practice to shave the head, because it still is a very countercultural, even with Sinead O'Connor and all those great people. It's a very countercultural act, and it's a very clear statement. And it's a great teaching, because certainly when a woman walks into a room with a shaved head, people have questions. Are you sick? What's that about? And it's a wonderful opportunity to actually talk about the Dharma.
Well, if you're interested, you can go join.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great marketing tool. Yeah. Cheap.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up here. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.